Bet you couldn't even catch a falling coin, old man." That was the first thing the boy in the silver jacket said to him, loud enough for the cameras, and I watched Tavin re-stand his post and not move a muscle, the way he had stood it 10,000 times before. I have served beside that man for 9 years. I am telling you this because I was close enough to see what the cameras did not, the corner of his eye, the smallest flicker, the one tell I have learned to read on a face that gives nothing away. He had already decided. I just did not know yet what he had decided to do. My name is Sergeant Idris Holloway, and that morning I was the senior man on the floor of the Grand Pavilion, the long glass hall they had thrown open for the household's first technology and gaming exposition. The king's house had decided, in its wisdom, that the old palace needed new friends, so they cleared the eastern conservatory of its orange trees, ran in a forest of cable, and filled the place with light walls and demonstration booths, and a crowd of young men and women who had never in their lives stood still for 30 seconds. We were there for the ceremony of it. 2 guards at the great doors, 2 flanking the dais, and Tavin and I posted at the central plinth where, by midday, a celebrated team of professional gamers were due to perform their famous reaction demonstration for the press. You will not have heard of these people by any real name, and I will not give you one, for they were nothing in the long account of the house. But on that floor that day, they were the sun. They called themselves a squad. 5 of them matched jackets, and at their head the boy in silver called him the captain, since that is what his followers called him, breathlessly, every other sentence. He was perhaps 23, with the easy contempt of a man who has been told he is the fastest at something since he was a child, and has never once been made to doubt it. He moved through the hall trailing phones the way a ship trails gulls. He stopped in front of Tavin because Tavin was a wall, and the young have always loved to push at walls. "Look at this," the captain said, walking a slow circle, hands spread for his audience. "They've got a statue guarding the gadgets, genuine antique. Does it come with the building?" Laughter, the soft phone-light laughter of people filming. Hey, big fella, you even allowed to blink." Tavin stood. Red tunic, brass to a shine, the tall bearskin throwing his face into shadow, white gloves at the rifle, eyes level on the middle distance, as still as the stone lions on the south steps. To anyone watching, he was exactly the wax museum relic the boy was selling him as. I knew otherwise, but it was not my place to say, and Tavin would not have wanted me to. "This is the problem with this whole country," the captain announced, turning to the cameras now, warming to it. "We worship slow. We put a man in a fur hat to stand in a doorway for 8 hours and we call it noble. You know what's actually impressive? Reflexes, speed. The human nervous system pushed to the absolute edge." He tapped his own temple. 200 milliseconds. That's my average reaction time. 200, you know what his is. He jerked a thumb back at Tavin without looking. Geological. His squad howled. The crowd thickened. Somewhere a press officer from the household was smiling the frozen smile of a man who has just watched the day's careful plan slide off the table. I want you to understand what restraint costs because the camera never shows it. A man being mocked wants to answer. It is the oldest pull in the body, older than discipline, older than rank. To stand and take a boy's contempt in front of 200 phones, to let him build his little kingdom on your silence, that is not the absence of a reaction. It is a reaction. It is the hardest thing a soldier learns, harder than any march, and Tavin did it the way he did everything without a flicker, his breath even, his weight square. The only thing that moved on him was that one muscle at the corner of his eye, and only I saw it, and I knew what it meant. It meant he had measured the boy. You see, the household had not put just any man at that plinth by accident. I had requested Tavin for the central post myself, the night before, when I read the program and saw what they meant to do at noon. The reaction demonstration. The famous machine. I had stood in this hall as a young soldier, and I had served beside Tavin Reese before either of us ever wore the bearskin. in a place and a trade neither of us speaks of casually. And I knew exactly one thing the silver-jacketed boy did not. That of every living person in that glass hall, the slowest-looking man was the fastest one. But that was not mine to reveal. So I held my post, 2 strides to Tavin's left, and I watched the boy dig his own pit deeper, and I waited. "Tell you what," the captain said, and now there was an edge of real meanness under the play because the crowd was his, and a crowd is a hungry thing. He pulled a coin from his jacket, a bright commemorative piece, the kind they were handing out at the door. He held it up between 2 fingers. "Reaction test. Oldest one there is. I drop it, you catch it. A statue can't catch a coin." He grinned at the lenses. "Let's find out if there's a man in there at all." He held the coin over Tavin's open. But Tavin's hand was not open. Tavin's hands were where they had been all morning, one at the small of his back, one at the rifle, regulation, unmoving. He was not going to play. He was on duty, and a guard on duty does not catch coins for a boy's show, and the boy knew it, and that was the whole cruelty of the dare. It was built so that silence looked like failure. "No," the captain laughed, delighted, and let the coin fall anyway. It rang on the marble between Tavin's boots and spun and lay still, a small bright accusation. "There it is, documented." The royal reflex. He stepped back into the applause of his own people. Slow country, slow men. Honestly, it's a miracle anything gets defended around here. A woman from the household, Myra Vane, the exposition's coordinator, a sharp and decent person I had worked with before, was at my elbow now, white-faced. "Sergeant," she breathed, "can you make him stop? The press are eating this alive. By noon it'll be everywhere." "By noon," I said, and I confess there was something in my chest I should not have let into my voice, a kind of slow warmth. "I think you'll find it's the boy who's everywhere, but not the way he means." She looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign tongue. I said nothing more. Across the hall, on the raised platform, 2 technicians in branded shirts were wheeling out the reaction machine, a tall black console with a curved bank of lights and 2 podium grips, the device that measured a person's reflex to the 1,000th of a second and printed the number on a screen the size of a door. The famous machine. The whole reason the squad was here. The captain saw it come out and clapped his hands together like a child at a feast. "That's the one," he called to the room. "Noon, the big screen. We're going to show you all what a real reaction time looks like." He swung back toward Tavin one last time, and he could not help himself, because men like him never can. "Maybe we'll let the statue have a go, if it can find the button." The crowd laughed. Tavin did not. And I, who had carried a man down a mountain beside Tavin Reese in a year we do not name, who had seen with my own eyes what those slow-looking hands could do when the world depended on it. I stood at my post and felt something I had not felt in a long time, watching that boy walk away pleased with himself. I felt sorry for him. The next hour the hall filled. Word travels fast in a building stitched together with cable, and the boy's little performance at the plinth had already become a clip, and the clip had already become a tide of people drifting toward us with their phones up, hoping the statue would do something, anything. It did not. Tavin stood. I stood. The coin still lay on the marble between his boots, because no one had been permitted to disturb the post to retrieve it, and somehow that little bright thing made the whole spectacle worse. A trophy the boy had left at the feet of the man he thought he had beaten. Myra Vane came back twice. The first time she begged me to have the post moved. I told her with respect that the post does not move because a guest is rude. The post moves when the watch commander moves it, and the watch commander was at the great doors and had heard nothing he found alarming. The second time she came back, she had a different look, the look of a person who has just been handed a fresh problem on top of an old one. "They want him in it," she said. "In what?" "The demonstration." Noon. She pressed her tablet to her chest. "The captain's people came to my office. They want to put your guard on the reaction machine, on the big screen, live in front of the press." She swallowed. They're framing it as a tribute. The old guard versus the new champion. They've already written the captions. They mean to humiliate him on camera in front of the entire exposition, Sergeant, and they've made it sound like an honor so the household can't refuse without looking like it has something to hide. There it was. That is how men like the captain work, and to be fair to him, he worked it well. He had built a trap with no clean way out. If the household forbade it, the story became the stuffy old palace afraid to let a relic be tested, hiding behind protocol. If they allowed it and Tavan refused to play, the story became the statue that could not face the machine. And if Tavan played and lost, which the boy believed was the only possible outcome, the story became a slow old country humbled by a fast young one, packaged and posted before the orange trees were back in the conservatory. Every road led to the same place. That is craftsmanship, of a kind. I have built a few traps myself, in another life, and I can respect the architecture even when I want to dismantle it. What did the watch commander say? I asked. He said, Myra told me carefully, that no member of the guard is required to perform for a guest, and that he would not order it. But that if a soldier chose of his own will to step off his post during the relief and accept a private challenge as a man and not as the guard, that is the soldier's own affair, and the household would not stand in his way. She looked at me. Sergeant, I think he was leaving it to him, to your man. I almost smiled. The watch commander was an old fox named Brennan who had served 31 years and missed nothing, and I understood at once that Brennan had read the same program I had, knew the same thing I knew, and had decided to let the boy build his own gallows and climb up onto it of his own free will. Brennan was not protecting Tavan. Brennan was protecting the boy from a charge of orders given, so that nothing at all, could ever soften the lesson that was coming. Then it's Tavan's to decide, I said. Will he do it? I looked at my friend. He had heard every word. We were astride apart and Myra had not lowered her voice. His face had not changed. The bearskin's shadow lay across the upper half of it like a visor, and below it his jaw was set in the exact unbothered line it had held all morning. But that muscle at the corner of his eye moved again once, and I knew. He'll do it, I said. At 1:45 the relief came up, smart and on the minute, and for the first time in 6 hours Tavan Reese stepped off his post. He did it correctly, by the book, the handover crisp, the rifle squared away to the armory steward, the bearskin and tunic exchanged in the side room for the plain undress order the household keeps for men coming off the line, dark trousers, a white shirt, the regimental tie, no medals, nothing to mark him but the bearing he could not have shed if he tried. When he came back out onto the floor as a man in a plain shirt, the crowd did not even recognize him at first. Then someone did, and the murmur ran, and the captain's grin came up across the hall like a sunrise. There he is, the captain crowed, bounding up onto the platform beside the great machine, microphone in hand now, a technician adjusting the curved bank of lights behind him. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. We talked this morning about slow versus fast, about old versus new. Well, our friend from the front door has agreed to test his world-famous royal reflexes against the machine. Laughter, applause, a sea of lifted phones. And then, after he's had his go, I'll show you what an actual professional does. Tavan walked up the 3 steps to the platform without hurry. He did not wave. He did not play to the room. He simply went and stood at the right-hand podium grip and waited, hands at his sides, the same patience he had shown the doorway for 6 hours, and there was something in that stillness on the bright stage that made the laughter falter a little at the edges, though no one could have said why. Rules are simple, the captain said, mostly to the cameras. When the lights go red, you slam the pad. The machine times you to the 1,000th of a second. Average humans around 250, trained gamer like me 200 sometimes under. He flashed his teeth. Statues, we'll find out. You ready, big man? You sure you don't want a warm-up? At your age, I don't want you pulling something. His squad laughed on cue. Tavan looked at the machine. He looked at the curved bank of lights, the podium pad, the great screen above. He took it all in the way I had watched him take in 100 unfamiliar rooms over the years. Corners first, then the threat, then the angles, a sweep so fast and so habitual that to a stranger it looked like nothing at all. Then he set the fingers of his right hand lightly above the pad, not touching it, hovering, and he said the first words he had spoken all day. "How many rounds?" His voice was quiet and level and carried farther than the boy's amplified shout, because the hall had gone, by then, very nearly silent. The captain blinked, thrown for half a second by being answered at all. Best of 5. 5 lights, 5 reactions, lowest average wins. Why, you want to make it interesting. He recovered his grin. You want to put money on it, Grandad. No, Tavin said. Money's nothing to wager. He let that sit. Then, if I win, you'll take down the clip from this morning, the coin. And you'll stand in front of these cameras and say the thing you said about this country, about slow men and what gets defended. You'll say it was wrong. The hall held its breath. The captain laughed, but it was a beat too late and a half-step too loud. And if you lose? Then I'll have lost, Tavin said simply, in front of everyone to a faster man, and you'll have your clip. He settled his stance. Your machine, your rules, 5 lights. The technician's hand moved to the console. And I, 2 strides away at the foot of the platform, finally let myself breathe, because I had been waiting 9 years to watch a room full of people learn what I already knew. Let me tell you the thing the boy did not know, so that you will not make the same mistake he did. Before Tavin Reese ever wore a bearskin, before either of us came to the house, he was the fastest marksman the old service had produced in a generation. I do not mean fast in the careless way young men use the word. I mean measured, witnessed, recorded. There is a test the old service runs, the snap board they call it, where a man stands before a bank of targets that show themselves at random for a fraction of a second and vanish, and his draw, his aim, and his decision are all timed together, because in the work we did, the draw is nothing without the decision. A fast hand that hits the wrong thing is worse than a slow one. Tavin held the snap board record, not the regiment's record, the service's. For 11 years, no man came within 40 thousandths of a second of it. Generals who had never heard his name had heard of the number. And the number was not a trick of the trigger finger. The instructors who trained us used to say that real speed lives behind the eyes, that the hand is only as quick as the mind deciding for it, and the mind is only as quick as the calm behind it. Panic is slow. Anger is slow. Fear is the slowest thing there is. It floods the body with everything it does not need and steals the thousandths one by one. The fastest reactions in the world, they taught us, belong to the men with the stillest hearts. Speed, they said, is a kind of peace. That is why they put a man like Tavin in a doorway and asked him to stand still for 8 hours, and why he was so very good at it. The stillness the boy mocked was not the opposite of speed. It was its root. Every hour Tavin stood that post in perfect, unhurried calm. He was not rusting. He was sharpening the only blade that had ever mattered, the quiet behind the eyes. The boy with the 200 millisecond average had a fast finger and a panicked heart, and he had built his whole life on the first without ever once being tested on the second. The technician brought up the great screen. 2 names, the captain's handle in a blaze of color, and beside it plainly the word the household had typed, guard. The lights on the curved bank glowed amber, waiting. The hall pressed in. Even the squad had stopped laughing. They had arranged themselves at the platform's edge with their phones up, ready to capture the humiliation, and not one of them had noticed that the man at the podium had not blinked, had not shifted, had not betrayed a single ounce of the nerves that any normal person would feel under 200 lenses. Guard goes first, the captain said, generous in victory before it had happened. Show us what you've got, big man. Watch the lights. When they flash red, hit the pad. Try to stay awake. The technician's voice came calm and even over the speakers. Round 1, on the random. Amber, amber, amber. I have replayed what happened next more times than I can count, and I still cannot tell you the moment the lights turned, because Tavin's hand was already down before my own eyes had finished registering the color. There was no flinch, no jerk, no visible gathering of effort. The amber became red, and in the same breath the pad was struck, not slapped, not pounded, but pressed, clean and final, the way he did everything, no wasted motion anywhere in it. The number came up on the great screen. For a moment nobody understood it. Then a single technician at the side console said, out loud, before he could stop himself, that can't be calibrated right. 141 thousandths of a second. The captain's grin did not fall all at once. It is never all at once with men like him. First it freezes, then it tries to rebuild itself on different ground. Lucky, he said, too fast. Pre-fire, he guessed. Anybody can guess one. The machine penalizes guessing. You go before the light, it flags you. Did it flag him? It didn't flag him, the technician said quietly. It was clean. He reacted, he didn't guess. Round 2, Tavin said to the technician, ignoring the boy entirely. On the random. Amber, a longer wait this time, the console stretching it deliberately, 3 seconds, 4, the kind of delay built to make a nervous hand twitch early and foul the run. Tavin's hand did not twitch. It hovered, weightless, patient, the patience of a man who has spent 6 hours that very morning holding perfectly still in a doorway, 10,000 mornings before it, a lifetime of teaching his body that waiting is not the enemy. Red. The pad pressed. 138. The hall made a sound then, a low collective intake that you do not often hear from a crowd, the sound of 200 people revising what they thought they were watching. A phone, somewhere near the back, was no longer pointed at the captain. It was pointed at Tavin, then another, then a dozen. Round 3, said the technician, and there was something new in his voice now too, something close to reverence, the voice of a man who has spent his career running a machine and has just watched it meet someone it was not built to measure. I want to be fair to the captain here, because contempt is easy and the truth is more interesting. To his credit, and it was nearly the only credit he earned that day, he stopped talking. Somewhere in the space between round 1 and round 3, the performer in him fell silent, and the competitor, the real one, the kid who genuinely had been the fastest thing in every room he'd ever walked into, woke up and properly looked at the man across the platform. And I watched the boy's face change as he understood, slowly, the way you understand cold water, that he had walked up here to humble a relic, and was instead standing next to something he did not have a name for. Round 3, 140. Round 4, 135. By the 5th light, the hall was no longer a crowd at a show. It was a congregation. They had come to watch the new humble the old, and they were watching the old in a plain white shirt, with no medals and no fur hat and nothing at all to hide behind. Do something none of them had ever seen a human being do, and do it without once changing his expression, without once acknowledging the lenses, without a flicker of the hunger for their approval that drove every other person in that hall, the boy most of all. The 5th light went red, the pad pressed, 137. The great screen did the sum, and printed the average above the word guard, in letters a foot high, for the press and the phones and the whole drifting tide of the exposition to read. 138 thousandths of a second. And beside it, still glowing in its blaze of color, the captain's name, and under it empty, because the boy had not yet taken his turn. He had to take it now. There was no road back. He had built this stage himself, written the captions himself, summoned the press himself, and a crowd that he had spent all morning teaching to crave a humbling now stood ready to receive one. He had only mistaken which way it would fall. He could not walk off. So he stepped up to the left-hand podium, and he set his fingers above the pad. And for the first time that day, I saw the famous captain's hand do a small thing it had surely never done in front of a camera before. It trembled, just slightly. A flutter quickly stilled, the kind a man can hide from a crowd but not from another man who has spent a career watching hands. I saw it because Tavan had taught me to see it. Years ago, in the work we do not name, watch the hands, he used to say. The face lies, but the hands tell the truth. And the boy's hands were telling the truth now, and the truth was that he was afraid, and fear, as the old instructor said, is the slowest thing there is. Champions round, the technician said evenly. 5 lights on the random. The boy did not make jokes now. The performer was gone. Only the frightened competitor remained, and the frightened competitor knew, the way an athlete always knows in his gut before the scoreboard confirms it, that he was about to be beaten in front of everyone he had ever performed for. He stared at the amber lights with an intensity that I knew, even before the first number, would cost him. He was trying to be fast. That was the error. You cannot try to be fast. Trying is tension, and tension is slow. The moment you reach for speed, it flees from you. Tavan had not tried anything all morning. Tavan had simply been still, and let the speed come up out of the stillness like a fish rising to the surface. Amber red, the boy lunged at the pad. 209. A respectable number, a professional's number. On any other day, in any other room, against any other opponent, a number to be proud of. Beside the screen that still read 138, it landed like a stone. Round 2. The boy clenched his jaw, blew out a breath, told himself. I could see him telling himself to relax, which is the one instruction that has never once worked on a human being in the history of fear. Amber. The console stretched it. The boy's shoulders crept up toward his ears with every second the light held. Red. He jumped early, not before the light, but with that ragged, overeager strike of a man whose nerves have outrun his eyes. 231. He was getting slower. Pressure does that. Each round the gap on the screen grew, and each round the boy saw it grow, and the seeing made the next one worse, because now he was not reacting to the light at all. He was reacting to his own dread of the number, and you cannot beat a machine while you are busy losing to yourself. Round 3, 240. Round 4, 219, he steadied a little there, a small mercy, the competitor briefly mastering the boy. But it was far, far too late, and he knew it, and the crowd knew it, and the worst part, the part I almost could not watch, was that the crowd had turned. The same tide of phones he had commanded all morning was now filming his face as the numbers climbed, hungry for his humiliation exactly as he had taught them to be hungry. And there is no lonelier place on earth than the center of a crowd you yourself trained to want your fall. Round 5. The boy did not even lunge. He pressed the pad almost gently, a man laying down a weapon. 251. Slower than the average human he had mocked 6 hours before. The screen printed it. Above the captain's blazing handle, in letters a foot high, 230. And beside it, calm and final, the guards, 138. Nearly 100 thousandths of a second. In the boy's own trade, in his own arena, on his own machine, by his own rules, it was not a contest. It was a different order of being. The hall was silent, not the hushed, expectant silence of before, but the deeper kind, the kind that falls when people have witnessed something that rearranges what they believed. I have stood in 2 or 3 silences like that in my life, and they are not comfortable. They are holy, and they are heavy, and everyone in them knows they will remember exactly where they were. It was into that silence that the old man came forward. I had not noticed him in the crowd. A spare, upright figure in a plain gray coat, the sort of man who is easy to overlook until he chooses otherwise, which is a quality I have learned to respect because the most dangerous men I have ever known had it. He came out of the press of people near the platform steps, and he was looking at Tavan with an expression I can only call recognition, and the crowd parted for him without quite knowing why, the way crowds do for a certain kind of bearing. He stopped at the foot of the stage. He did not look at the captain at all. "It is you," he said to Tavin, and his voice, though not loud, reached every corner of that silent hall. I wondered when I saw the program. I told myself it could not be. They do not put men like you in doorways. He shook his head slowly. Reese, snap board, the 2-decimal run at the winter trials. I was a young officer in the gallery the day you said it, and I have told that story for 30 years, and not one man I told it to ever believed the number was real. He turned then to the room, to the press, to the phones, to the boy frozen at his podium. 11 years, the old man said. No soldier in the entire service came within 40 thousandths of that man's record. Not one. They built the snap board to find the fastest hands a nation produces, and it found his, and then it could not find anyone faster, and after a while they nearly stopped running it because what was the point? A dry soldier's almost smile. And you brought him up onto a stage to teach him about speed. The boy's mouth opened. Nothing came out. And here is the part I will remember longest, the part the clips never quite capture, because a clip only shows you what was done and not what was held back. Tavin Reese had been handed, in that silence, a perfect revenge. The boy had mocked him for 6 hours, dropped a coin at his boots, dragged him onto a stage to humiliate him before 200 lenses, and now the whole hall stood ready, waiting, hungry to watch the relic finish the boy off. One sharp word from Tavin, and the captain would have been buried so deep the clips would have followed him for the rest of his career. Tavin said no sharp word. He stepped to the center of the platform, and he looked at the boy, not in triumph, not in contempt, but with something steadier and far harder to bear, the level, unhurried gaze of a man who has nothing left to prove and never did. And when he spoke quietly, so that the room had to lean in to hear it, which meant they heard every word. You're fast, Tavin said. Faster than nearly anyone in this hall. That's a real thing and you earned it, and I won't let these people pretend now that you didn't just because you lost a round. A murmur ran through the crowd. He let it pass. But you mistook the thing you were looking at. You thought standing still was the opposite of being fast. It isn't. It's where the speed comes from. He paused. I stood that doorway 6 hours this morning. Every hour of it I was getting faster, not slower, because the only thing that has ever made a hand quick is a quiet heart. You've got the quick hand. Spend the next 30 years learning the quiet heart, and you'll be twice the man you are now. The boy stared at him, and then, to his lasting credit, the credit that nearly redeemed the whole arrogant morning, he straightened up, and he turned to face the cameras he had summoned, and he made good on the wager. He did not stall. He did not soften it into a joke. He looked into the lenses and he said, "This morning I said this country worships slow, and that a man standing in a doorway is nothing, and that nothing real gets defended around here. I was wrong. I was wrong about him, and I was wrong about all of it. The coins coming down. So's the clip." He swallowed, and the last of the performer left him, and what stood there was just a young man who had learned something. I came here the fastest man in the room. I'm leaving as the second. He held out his hand. Tavin shook it. One firm motion, no flourish, the way he did everything, and the hall, the congregation, let out the breath it had been holding and broke into the kind of applause that has nothing cruel in it at all, the rare, clean sound of people glad to have been wrong. I have thought a great deal since about why the boy did it, why he stood and ate the loss in public when he could have slunk away, and I have come to believe it was the handshake offered first. Tavin had not crushed him. Tavin had given him a door to walk out of with his honor intact, and a man given that door will almost always choose to walk through it standing. That is the part the boy's 200-millisecond reflexes could never have taught him, and it is the part Tavin gave him for free, having every right to do otherwise. The speed was never the lesson. The speed was only the thing that made the room quiet enough to hear it. The old man in the gray coat caught my eye as the applause ran on, and he gave me the smallest nod, one soldier to another across a crowd, and then he was gone the way men like him go, before anyone thinks to ask his name. That should have been the end of it, and for the cameras it was. But I will tell you the last thing, because it is the truest thing, and it is why I have told you any of this at all. When the relief ran down at the end of the watch, Tavin changed back. He put off the plain white shirt and the regimental tie, and he put on the red tunic and the brass and the white gloves, and he took up the rifle, and he settled the tall bearskin so that its shadow fell again across the upper half of his face like a visor. And he walked back out onto the floor of the grand pavilion, past the booths and the light walls and the thinning crowd, and he took up the central post at the plinth again. The same doorway, the same square stance, the same perfect, unhurried stillness he had held that morning before any of it happened. The press had moved on. The phones had drained away to chase the next thing. The clip of the fastest hands in the room was already racing across the world without him, the way such things do, untethered from the quiet man who had made it. And Tavin Reese stood his post as though none of it had touched him, because none of it had. He had not been fast for the cameras. He had not been still for the crowd. He had been exactly what he was, in front of 200 lenses and in front of no one, the same man either way. And that, not the number on the screen, is the thing I have served beside for 9 years and will carry the rest of my life. Someone had retrieved the coin at last. A child of the household, one of the staff's youngsters, had picked it up off the marble during the commotion and now, shy, came and held it up to him. The bright commemorative piece the boy had dropped at his boots that morning to prove there was no man inside the uniform. For one moment, the smallest moment, Tavin looked down at the small hand and the bright coin. And then, gently, without breaking his stance, with a movement so quick and so precise that the youngster gasped and then laughed, he plucked the coin clean out of the air as it was offered, closed his white glove around it, and pressed it back into the small palm to keep. Then his eyes went level again, forward to the middle distance, and he was a statue once more. I stepped back to my own post 2 strides to his left, and I confess I was smiling under the bearskin, where no camera could see it, and no one would ever know. A man had come to that hall certain that the world worships the wrong things, that speed is loud, and stillness is weakness, and the men who guard the quiet places are relics waiting to be retired. He left having learned the opposite. The fastest hands in that room belonged to the man who had stood the longest without moving. The stillness was not the absence of the storm. It was the eye of it. And the deepest speed any of us will ever possess lives not in the hand at all, but in the quiet behind the eyes, the calm a man builds, one unhurried hour at a time, until the day the world finally asks him to be fast, and finds to its astonishment that he already is. That is what I know of Tavin Reese, who held the snapboard record for 11 years and never once mentioned it, and who stands a doorway still, the slowest-looking man in any room he enters, and the fastest one. We were both back on post by the time the orange trees came home to the conservatory. Neither of us said a word about it. There was nothing to say. He had simply been who he was all day in front of everyone, and that had been enough. It is always enough when a man has built himself right. The coin, I am told, that child carries still.